Hey Optimancers, Chris here. Wanted to start by wishing you all a Merry Christmas, and thank you to all of you who've been visiting this channel this year. Since Christmas Day happens to fall on a regular release day of Treat Monk's Temple this year, I decided to spend some time thinking about what my viewers might want to watch during the holiday. Build for, Santa Claus or Frosty the Snowman just seems overdone. Deep analysis of the optimization options for a Psy Warrior might be a video I do in the future, but doesn't really fit for today. So, for a change of pace, I figured I'd do something a little more fun. So, as players at my table are well aware, if they encounter an owlbear, it could be the same old owlbear, but it might be something very different. I like to keep my players on their toes and give them some unexpected challenges, so monster stat blocks that are published aren't always the stat blocks I end up using when I run the creature. I homebrew and reskin monsters a lot. Reskinning, yeah, I leaned into that one recently. So, speaking of homebrewing, when I run a written adventure, I tend to change a lot of it. And in one such adventure that I purchased, I didn't write it, but I was running it, and the party needed to retrieve the skin of a dire troll. So the party was 15th level, and here's the dire troll from Monsters of the Multiverse. It's a 13 challenge rating creature. Now, you're not going to throw a dire troll against a party of 15th level characters. That is no challenge whatsoever. It doesn't even qualify as an easy encounter. And I want this to be like a really difficult encounter. So, first thing you think is throw in some minions. So, you add a troll and it's up to easy. 2 trolls, now it's medium. 4 trolls, now it's hard. And I hit deadly at 6 trolls. We'll add 1 more for good measure, and we've got a deadly encounter. But not really. For groups I play with, this encounter would not be a challenge at all. So how can you make an encounter like this challenging for a party of 15th level characters? I mean, if we look at the troll and the dire troll stat blocks, one thing that should jump out is these creatures are melee only. They have pretty run-of-the-mill attacks, no ranged attacks, no fly speed, and the only thing they really do that's unusual is the regeneration. And a halfway experienced D&D player already knows that you need to finish them off with fire or acid damage, and it shuts down the regeneration. And with 5 points of regeneration, it really just doesn't make a whole lot of difference. So, I mean, in theory, a party could just lay down a couple web spells, then blast these things down to 0 hit points from a distance, then throw a fireball, and the fight is over, using what are low-level spells for a 15th level party. Heck, they don't even need the webs. They could just shoot arrows at them and keep backing up until they drop. And then, finish them off with firebolts or something. This might be an appropriate encounter for inexperienced players. But if you are playing with people who are moderately experienced even, this encounter requires a tune-up. And this is some general advice if you're a DM. If an encounter can be solved by just backing up and shooting, that might be fine for a run-of-the-mill encounter, but if you want it to be a challenging encounter, you need to remove that option. So in this case, that's pretty easy, as the players would be facing this encounter in the middle of a portal between planes of existence, so I could make the battle map pretty much anything. In this particular case, the map would cover roughly a circle of 70 by 70 feet, and if the players flew up, they traveled to a different plane of existence, and if they flew down, they traveled to a different plane of existence. So they're basically trapped in a limited space with these creatures, making kiting them basically impossible. This is not to be mean, because, if you're fighting creatures that can't fly or do range attacks, and the party can just fly above them and kill them, then they're employing good tactics, but it's not fun to play through, because the players have no sense of danger. Problem is, even without the flying, there's still not a sense of danger, because even the dire troll doesn't do that much damage. And they can just throw the dire troll in a force cage, and then they just have to take out the trolls. And they really don't do much damage, and honestly are going to have trouble even hitting the party in the first place. So some monster redesign is in order to make this an interesting encounter. And if I look at the artwork for the dire troll, I mean, this looks so cool. This is amazing artwork, by the way, so I looked it up, and the artist is Ralph Horsley, and I'll be linking their DeviantArt page in the video description. but this is the official artwork for the Dire Troll. And usually when I homebrew stuff, the first thing I do is I pick the artwork for the creature, then I look at the artwork, and I imagine what this monster might be capable of. So I look at this, and what I have is a monster with a regeneration of 5 points per round, a bite attack, 4 claw attacks, a whirlwind of claw attacks, and that's it. Put it to print. I think this creature could do more. I mean, there's 3 heads. What are those other heads doing? And check out the arms. Like, it looks like new arms are trying to grow out of the existing ones. And my favorite part, look at the torso. There are faces there, like more creatures are just trapped inside this troll. So I thought, what if this creature literally absorbed other trolls, absorbing their power and trapping them inside its body? And that was the basis of my redesign. And my goal was to kind of have this monster turn the encounter on its head, make it unlike other encounters they faced, and actually put a scare into the players. So I present my version of the Dire Troll, and the first thing I should say is, when it comes to challenge rating, I don't know what the challenge rating of the monster I'm about to present to you is. I mean, it's definitely more than 20 if we go by 5th edition standards. I mean, 5th edition standards are so lax, it might even be a challenge rating 30. But I'll tell you that I've run this encounter for 5 different groups. So this Dire Troll plus 7 regular trolls, and all of them defeated it. But none of them found it easy, and I had several players comment on how much they enjoyed the encounter, and specifically the design of this monster. So that's a good sign that I think I hit the mark. So if you want to borrow or use what I'm about to go over, please feel free, but I want to give you some warning. If it's not an experienced group that are able to adjust tactics based on the situation, this actually could be a deadly encounter. So just a reminder, in this particular case, the party needed to retrieve the skin of this Dire Troll. I mention that because it's important to the design of this creature, because I worked on some features here specifically relating to the task. So if you want to use this, then you either want them to have to skin the troll or make some adjustments. So I'm going to start with some stuff that's going to look really run-of-the-mill. We got an armor class of 17, it's natural armor. That's not that high for a 15th level group. The hit points are significant at 365, but honestly, if you have 6 characters and most of them can do 50 damage a round or more, this could be a very short combat. Now I use Roll20 and I show the players the health bar, and in this encounter I think that really works well. Speed of 40 feet is okay, nothing exceptional. And here's the ability scores and saving throws. So this thing has a proficiency bonus of +6, and I made it proficient in all physical saves, but none of the mental ones. That made sense to me. And as you can see, it is very strong, but so far it's just kind of a souped up Dire Troll. Nothing exceptional. Skill proficiencies are what you'd expect for this kind of creature. It's immune to frightened and the poison conditions, and it has 60 feet of dark vision. And now let's get into the other stuff. So its base features are regeneration. So I've improved the regeneration, so it regenerated 20 hit points at the start of its turn. Honestly, 15th level, that's still not very much. 5 points really is nothing. 20 points might be something if we're facing a low-level party, but not against a 15th level party. And I indicated here that if the party starts skinning the Dire Troll, the regeneration stops. This is very important, as you'll see later. Legendary resistance, so I just did a standard legendary resistance for this thing. Sometimes I play with legendary resistance a bit, but in this case I figured if the party starts the combat by trying to banish the Dire Troll, it's probably going to need legendary resistance. And it has 3 legendary actions, and it can use a legendary action to make a claw attack. Here's its claw attack. You can see +15 to hit, average 22 slashing damage. So it's basically like a beefed up Dire Troll claw attack. And it has another option for legendary actions, which we're not going to be using right away, and I'm going to come back to it. So it has a reaction, and it's called Deflect Attack, and it can impose disadvantage on a single attack roll. I mean, pretty bland feature, but it's got something to do with its reaction. And then it has multi-attack. So the troll makes 1 bite attack, 2 claw attacks, and 1 rend attack, which is like its foot, right? It has like talons on its foot. Then it mutates if it's below full hit points. So this Dire Troll starts the combat with one head, two arms, two legs, but that changes as the combat goes on. So let's talk about how mutation works. So mutation, if the dire troll is below its full hit points at the end of its turn, it mutates. If it has taken fire or acid damage since its last turn, it doesn't. The reason I capitalized end here is because regeneration is at the start of a troll's turn, and mutation is at the end, and I wanted to keep track. Regenerate, start of the turn, mutate, end of the turn. Now, you gotta be thinking at this point, if we can shut down both the regeneration and the mutation just by doing acid or fire damage, this thing's not gonna be too hard to kill. Well, we're gonna get back to that. So, here's the mutation chart. I roll a d4, and if I roll a 1, it grows a head. If I roll a 2, it grows an arm. If I roll a 3, it grows a leg. And if I roll a 4, it erupts in warts and boils. Also noted, it sheds its mutations at the end of a combat. That way, it kind of makes sense why this troll is starting the combat with one head, two arms, and two legs. And as the combat goes on, it looks more and more like its picture. A head, an arm, or leg also adds 20 hit points to the dire troll, which is not a lot, but it is something. So, heads. If the dire troll grows another head, it may roll an additional d20 whenever it makes an intelligence, wisdom, or charisma saving throw, taking the best result. Remember, it had +1 for all of those. When it uses the multi-attack action, it gets one additional bite attack. And if the dire troll goes more than one additional head, the effects stack. So, a dire troll with 4 heads rolls 4 dice when making any of those mental saving throws. So those +1s end up doing some heavy lifting when you have 4 dice to roll. And of course, every time it takes the multi-attack option, it is a bit more dangerous because of that additional attack. Here's the bite attack. It's a high chance to hit, same as the claws. Does some piercing and poison damage, maybe 27 points if the character has no resistances or immunities. A little bit more than the claw attack. Okay, what if it grows an additional arm? When the dire troll grows another arm, its deflect attack reaction can be used an additional time between turns. So just a reminder, the bland deflection attack reaction, but start imposing disadvantage 2, 3, or 4 times every round, and players are going to feel that. Also, of course, it makes another attack, and it all stacks if we get more arms. And legs. So this one is fun. If it grows another leg, it gets an additional special action on its turn called Scramble and Rend. And every leg is another Scramble and Rend on its turn. So, the Scramble and Rend action, this can only be taken by a dire troll with an additional leg. If the dire troll is grappled or restrained, the condition ends. It then scrambles up to its speed, ignoring all difficult terrain and barriers, including Force Cage, and I'll explain why that's there, and makes a Rend attack. So, this obviously needs explanation. I knew this creature was going to get trapped. I mean, that's what I would do. It's Big Bad Guy 101. Like, you can probably guess that more than one group that I ran this for started this combat by immediately throwing this thing in a force cage with bars and then throwing a wall of fire over it. It's the smart thing to do. But it's also really run-of-the-mill, and I didn't want this to be a run-of-the-mill fight. Now, keep in mind, this dire troll doesn't start with this action. It can only take it if it's grown another leg. That's intentional. And why the special force cage wording? Well, that wasn't originally in there. But one of my players pointed out that force cage says you can't leave by non-magical means. So I had conflicting rules. This feature said it could pass through any barrier. Force cage says, nah, you need magical movement. So technically it should be the DM's call because we're talking about 2 specific, not general rules. But I didn't want any debate. So I said I certainly intended the feature to allow movement through force cage. In fact, it was my first thought, but I threw in the extra wording, so there was no question. Anyways, here's the Rend attack, just a little bit less damage than the claw. And then the final is warts and boils. If the dire troll gets this mutation, its natural armor class improves by 1, and of course it stacks. Of all of them, this is probably the least exciting. So let me describe how this encounter ran pretty much every time. Like I said, I ran this encounter 5 different times with 5 different groups. The dire troll would always get trapped somehow, maybe a force cage, maybe something else. Also, speaking of Tactics 101, always drop the big bad guy first. Trolls aren't really scary to a 15th level party, but they knew something was up with this thing. There was no way I was just throwing a standard dire troll at them. So they wanted to drop it, finish it off, then mop up the trolls, and that's standard tactics. So all the parties pretty much all beat this thing on initiative, and what they would do is they would whittle it down, watching that hit point bar go down slowly but steadily. So when the dire troll's turn comes up, maybe it's had a chance to do some claw attacks with legendary actions, because those are the only legendary actions I'm using before its first turn. But maybe it hasn't even had a chance to do those. Then its turn starts, and maybe it regenerates 20 hit points, depending on whether it took acid or fire damage. But it's no big deal. I mean, that's less than a single attack by a party member. Then it's trapped, so it can't really do anything. And then it mutates, so it probably gets another 20 hit points and maybe one more attack. And the players get to see that hit point bar go up a tiny bit. But when you're the player and it's round one and you've done all this damage to this thing, and now it's got its turn, and not much happens, and it's mostly dead, well, you're not really scared. So you're pretty confident at this point, and everything's about to turn on its head in this encounter, but as a player, you have no idea. So I'm going to let you know about the final two features of this monster that make this a real challenging encounter. So at some point, someone is going to do some acid or fire damage to this thing. They might do it right away, but they know they don't need to do it right away necessarily, but at some point it's going to need to take those damage types to end the regeneration. So when I do, I reveal this. Damaging the skin. The troll has taken acid or fire damage, thus damaging the skin of the troll. The troll must heal this damage before it is killed if its skin is to be preserved. Remember, the whole point of the quest of going after this troll was to retrieve its skin. So right there, I've told them, you can win the fight using acid or fire, but you'll lose the quest. And remember, I said that regeneration stops if the skinning process is started. So the key is revealed that in order to win the fight, what they need to do is finish it off while not doing any fire or acid damage. So instead of leaning towards those, they need to avoid them. So if a character hits this thing with a fireball and does 20 points of damage, what I would do is keep track of the damage. And the dire troll needs to heal or regenerate that much damage to restore the skin. Of course, it's not going to regenerate on its next turn because it's taken fire damage. And this led to some hilarious circumstances where the characters were casting healing spells on the dire troll whose regeneration had been stopped in order to get rid of the fire or acid damage. And you watch that wizard drop concentration on that wall of fire like a hot plate. Still, the thing is trapped, and its hit points are low. Its first turn came and went without any big surprises, so they still kind of figured they had everything in hand. Now, a really perceptive player might notice that after the dire troll's turn, you're not going to be using legendary actions to do claw attacks, even if you have the opportunity to do so. And the reason is because you're waiting for the next turn of any other troll. And at some point, after the dire troll's turn, one of the 7 trolls in the encounter is going to have a turn and mosey on up beside the dire troll. At the end of the troll's turn, the dire troll expends all 3 legendary actions on the last piece of the stat block to reveal to you here. Absorb. All 3 legendary actions. If the dire troll has another troll within 5 feet of itself, it may absorb the troll. The troll disappears, and the dire troll immediately gains another head, arm, and leg, as if they had been gained through mutation. The dire troll's current and maximum hit points increase by the amount of the current and maximum hit points of the absorbed troll. So trolls are nothing to the party at 15th level, but they do have a lot of hit points. They have 84 hit points. Plus the dire troll just got 60 additional hit points because they grew an arm, head, and leg. And the dire troll has another defensive reaction available now, and it's probably safe in a force cage that the player characters aren't concentrating on, so they can't just dismiss it. And so this dire troll might be perfectly safe until its next turn. And when its next turn comes up, it uses the special scramble and rend action first. Then it likely has like 7 or 8 attacks to make, like more than double what it started with, which are either going to start dropping characters or at least bring them close. It also, on its turn, it just got all 3 legendary actions back, and there are 6 more regular trolls on the map. And that means the right tactics for this encounter just became the wrong tactics. You don't want to trap this thing. You don't want to do fire or acid damage, and you don't want to kill it first. You want to kill those darn 6 trolls so it can't absorb them. And it's almost certainly getting at least one more turn before this combat is over. And it's likely going to be absorbing at least one more troll, and it's getting significantly more powerful each time. It just keeps getting more and more attacks. It keeps getting more and more deflect attack reactions. It keeps getting more actions on its turn that allow it to move up to its speed so it can just go anywhere it wants. So as the combat continues, this very quickly goes from being a tough creature to a deadly creature. So, like I said, all 5 times I ran this encounter, the party did win the fight. But it was never an easy fight. And the players' reactions as the encounter goes from a cakewalk to, holy crap, it absorbs the trolls, is one of those DM moments that's really rewarding when you know you've surprised the players and now they have to actually think about how unique tactics are needed to face a challenge that they aren't used to and they've never considered before. Now, this creature probably isn't for every table. I'm sure there are DMs out there watching this video who are looking at this thing and going, I would never ever use this at my table, and that's fine. We all have different styles. For me, this was fun, and it was fun for my players. Now, the real question is this a Christmas video? Listen, I put the Santa hat on the Dire Troll. This is being released on Christmas Day, so obviously it's a Christmas video. And thanks all for watching. Merry Christmas, and until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and be merry. D&D is for every Tom, Dick, and Harry.